Chapter 10. She watched as Ethan disappeared down the highway. When she had seen him walking around the yard earlier, happy and content, he seemed completely unconcerned about the time of night or where he was. Then why shouldn't he be? He knew he was welcome here. Besides, he was part of the night. Not that he was a predator. More that he was a hunter. And now he had two capable sidekicks to work with him. Although she wasn't at all that sure about Sentry, who looked like he was a whole lot of untamed wolf. Kind of like Ethan. Loners, dangerous, keeping to themselves, and yet likely to be there when you needed them. At least she hoped Sentry would be that for Ethan. She slowly made her way back upstairs, grabbed 2 pain pills from inside the drawer at the side of her bed, and swallowed them with water from the glass on the bedside table. On impulse, she got up and walked to the window to take a last look at the night. She wouldn't put it past Ethan to sleep in the truck close by, in which case he might as well have slept on the couch. She had no compunction about keeping him close. He had the protective gene, as bad as any male she knew. That was nice to see in a guy. It had been a couple years since her last relationship. When Jason had walked out, it had been painful and difficult for both of them, but they knew they'd grown as far as they could together. It was time for a change. She had girlfriends who complained about boyfriends who cheated, boyfriends who lied, and boyfriends who ditched them. It wasn't like that with Jason. They'd sat down, taken a close look at where they were going, what each wanted from life, and realized they wanted different things, and really they needed different lives. It had been hard and painful. When he'd walked permanently, and she'd closed the door on that part of her life. For a while she dated, but her heart hadn't been in it. She found that the longer she stayed at home with the dogs, the happier she was. She wasn't antisocial, but neither was she an extrovert who needed people all the time. As she turned to walk back toward her bed, lights shone into her window. She frowned and watched as a truck took up the same spot where Ethan's truck had been. Instantly her heart hammered against her chest. Would that be Ethan again? Did he just do a circle around and then park again? She dashed to her night table and grabbed her phone. She sent him a text, asking if that was him again at the top of the driveway. When she didn't get an immediate response, she walked back over to the window and realized the truck lights were out. Her phone rang. "What are you talking about?" he asked without preamble. "Where are you?" "Almost home." "Then you better get your ass back here," she said boldly, "because now a truck is parked at the top of my driveway. And its lights are off." "Make sure those damn doors are locked," he ordered, his voice terse. "I'll be back in 5. Petrified now, she ran downstairs, holding her injured arm, and found she had indeed left the front door unlocked. She threw the bolt, raced to the back door in the kitchen, saw a chair there, and frowned. He must have had a reason for doing that. The garage door was locked. Nervous, her knees shaking, knowing that injured as she was, she couldn't fight as hard as she might need to, she made her way back upstairs, where she locked herself in the master bedroom with the dogs and stared out the window from the safety of the curtains, seeing if anybody approached. She couldn't see anybody, and that worried her too. While she'd been locking the doors, maybe they had made their way down the drive and were outside the house even now. It was an old house with lots of little funky levels and decks and porches. It'd be pretty easy to break in. Why did I never secure any of that? But she answered herself. Because it's never been an issue before, idiot. She shook her head as she argued with herself. She had to be really scared to be doing that again. She had talked to herself as a child growing up, and usually only when she was really frustrated. This wasn't frustration. This was something much worse. Her shoulder throbbed. She wanted to sit down, but she didn't dare leave the window and miss seeing anybody who might be walking toward her. What she really wanted to witness was Ethan's arrival, but she saw no sign of another truck approaching. She stood motionless for a good 10 minutes, waiting. Nothing. That's when she heard somebody outside at her kitchen door. She raced to the other window, revealing the back of the house, but couldn't see anything. With her hand to her throat, her injured arm firmly pressed against her chest, she stood behind her master bedroom door and tried to work on deep breathing. When her phone buzzed in her hand, she opened it to see Ethan was calling. "Somebody's downstairs." "I know," Ethan said quietly. "I can see him." "Where are you?" she cried out softly. "I parked a little farther out and came in the back way. I want to make sure you don't move, okay? Are you in the master bedroom?" "Yes, I am," she said. "Good. Stay there. Make sure the door is locked. If somebody comes upstairs or even inside, let me know. Otherwise, I only see one person trying to get into your kitchen door. I left your chair there." "Good," he said, "but it looks like he just went in the window anyway." She gasped, her heart slamming against her chest. "You'll take him out, right?" Her voice quavered, and she hated that. But the thought of fighting off an intruder terrified her. Already being injured made her feel more unprotected than ever. "You'll be fine," he said, his voice soothing. "I'm almost there now. Like I said, stay in the bedroom. If you can stop him from coming in, do that. He might ram the door with a shoulder or kick it in with a foot, so don't scream out in surprise." She glanced around, taking the chair from her small writing table, and propped it underneath the bedroom doorknob. If nothing else, the intruder would make a hell of a racket trying to come through. Then she sank to the floor by the door. "Hurry," she whispered. "I've propped a chair underneath the doorknob." "Good," he said. "Keep thinking. The minute you stop thinking and fear takes over, you become numb to opportunities you really can't afford to be without." Her knees tight against her chest, avoiding her injured arm, and her good arm wrapped around her, she sat motionless, waiting. It seemed like forever as she sat curled in a ball, the dogs at her side. But the phone was against her ear just in case Ethan said something. She could hear his breathing. "You've still got the phone line open?" "Of course," he whispered. "But don't talk if you don't have to. I'm on the way." Even the dogs appeared frozen. Neither barked nor whimpered. Like her, they understood something was wrong. She thought she heard something and froze, her breath catching in the back of her throat. Both her dogs were curled up at her side, only the large one bounded to the door, dropped his nose to the edge and sniffed. Instantly, Sin heard heavy sniffing on the other side. She lifted her head, tilted it sideways, and wondered. A knock came. "Sin, it's me. Ethan." She bounded to her feet, crying out in pain as her shoulder was wrenched in her quick movement. "Are you okay?" he asked sharply. "I'm fine," she said, stumbling to unlock the door. When she got it unlocked, she pulled it open. Bella jumped into the room, her nose to the ground, and she completely circled the room and came back. Sentry stood at the doorway as if on guard as she checked the place out. Then watched as she played with the other dogs happily. Ethan wrapped Sin in his arms and held her close, gently swaying back and forth. "Did you see him?" she asked. "Did he get away?" "Yes." He turned and pointed up the highway. She could see the vehicle was gone. She shook her head. "He was that fast." "Maybe he heard me coming," Ethan said. "And he slipped out the front door and took off." "Really? Or it could have been the dogs." Bella gave a sharp bark as we came into the house. "It might have been in warning, or it might have been in greeting. I don't know." Sin turned to look at Bella, who seemed to be happy lying on the floor. Senti still hadn't relaxed. She shook her head. "They're a marvel. But I sure wish we understood them better." He rubbed her good arm gently, his hand holding her shoulder carefully. "Can you sleep now?" She shook her head. "No, not now. I'm too wired. When I heard noises inside, I thought it was him coming up the stairs." He nodded. "I didn't want to give too much warning, just in case he circled back around the house. But he's gone now." She gave him a wide smile. "Do me a favor. Can you search very, very thoroughly?" He dropped a light kiss on her forehead and said, "Yes. And just to make sure, you come with me so you can see what I'm doing." They started with the other bedroom on the top floor. He went through the closets, checked under the bed, behind the door, then led her downstairs so she could check every room with him. By the time he was done, she was laughing. Okay, so I made too much out of it. He stopped in front of her. Absolutely you did not. That asshat was climbing in the kitchen window. I saw him. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Right? I keep trying to forget that part. Don't, he said, giving her a gentle shake. Remember, he was here. I saw him. It was real. We need to make sure he didn't come with a partner. Now that's not a thought I want to contemplate. That is definitely a consideration, he said. She nodded. It's a grim concept. But I don't know what else to believe. I'll stay the rest of the night, he said. But I want you to get into bed, and I want you to sleep. That shoulder of yours needs to heal. She grimaced. It's got to be. What? 5 o'clock in the morning now? He checked his watch. It's not quite 4:45 yet. She was tired. She leaned against the kitchen counter and brushed the tendrils of hair off her face. Her body was achy and sore. It feels like I need another painkiller, she muttered. That's why you should get into bed and rest. Even getting 4 hours is huge. She tried to assess how she felt, but the fatigue was definitely coming on now. Are you sure you'll stay? She hated the fear in her voice. But after what had just happened, she wondered if she'd ever be comfortable alone again. Yes, absolutely, I'm staying. Come on. Let's get you back to bed. He walked at her side as she slowly made her way up the stairs. In her room, he pulled back the bedcovers and motioned at her. Get back in. She kicked off her slippers and slowly eased herself down. He covered her up, leaned over, gave her a quick kiss, and said, Now 4 hours of sleep, nothing less. Do you hear me? Why does it feel so good to finally lie down? Because your body needs it, he said sternly. I know you can see that highway from where you are, but that's not an issue now. My truck is not up there, and nobody else will be coming back tonight. Understand? She gave him a tired smile and waved at him. Go. I'm fine. I'll be asleep in a few minutes. So saying, she rolled over onto her good side, tucked the pillow up underneath her head, and closed her eyes. He walked across the bedroom and whispered, Good night. She listened to his footsteps as he headed down the stairs. She hadn't even realized Bella was with him. But now it was like she was his ghost. Sin could hear the light patting of Bella's nails as she crossed the top hallway and skittered down the stairs, followed by Sentry's more sedate walk. Her own dogs appeared to have accepted Bella like none other, although they were still wary of Sentry. But then they were used to rescues too. Sin wondered if she had so easily accepted Ethan for the same reason. Was he a rescue as well? Bella was lost and homeless, a bit of a renegade. No, that was Sentry. Ethan, well, it was hard to find any description for him. But in a way, he suited the dogs, and the dogs suited him. The question that occupied her mind as she slowly drifted off to sleep was whether she suited Ethan, and whether his whole gang suited hers. They had something going on between them. She just didn't know what. As sleep finally overtook her, she realized it didn't matter, because she was willing to take the journey and to find out how far they would go. If it entailed two people getting together with a messy load of dogs, well, there were worse ways to live. And with that, sleep claimed her with a smile on her face. Back downstairs, Ethan stretched out on the couch. He kept a wary eye on Sentry, but Bella just crashed on the floor beside him. She was happy to be with him. Sin's 2 dogs were in the bedroom with her. So far, all 4 animals were getting along, but no doubt the 2 smaller, happier dogs were giving the others clearance. They were happy to have them around, but they were a little wary. And he could understand that. He stretched out, rolled over, and tried to close his eyes. But his mind buzzed, wondering at the identity of the intruder and why he came here. Ethan should have checked for a license plate. And then he considered something else. Who would have surveillance of this area? Anyone. He pulled up Google on his phone to see if anybody might have cameras. Farther down the road was Anna and Flynn's rescue. Did they have anything? Even though it was really early, he sent Flynn a text asking him, letting him know an intruder had been on Sin's property. Following that, he said he chased him off, but he was looking for a black pickup truck, likely a half-ton that had been parked at the top of her driveway. He fired that off and lay here, thinking about it. Was this connected to him? The only way it could be was if it was connected to the same drug lab they had taken down. He didn't know for sure, but it was too close a coincidence to ignore. Multiply that with a spy in the sky that could track things like that. But he didn't have access to any of those anymore. That was military-grade surveillance, not something he would pull in on a favor. Sin had no surveillance and no security to speak of. And that was something he aimed to fix. Soon. As he lay here, his phone beeped. Surprised, he saw Flynn's name. Flynn was pissed and said he was checking cameras right now. Ethan responded, "Sorry to wake you." Never a better reason than to help a friend. At that, Ethan settled back with a smile. He wasn't sure if Flynn meant that Sin was a friend or that Ethan was. Either way, it was good they had somebody on their side. Suddenly, Sentry bolted to his feet, his hackles rising as he stared at the kitchen. Ethan hopped to his feet and glided across the living room floor, pulling up against the wall just short of the doorway. That had been the other concern he'd had, that there might have been two men, one who took off in the truck and the other sticking around. Ethan's truck was parked farther up the highway, out of sight. But did anybody know he was still here? He could hear something rattling at the kitchen door. He sent Flynn another text, then pocketed his phone, crouching down low. When people came in, they rarely looked down at floor height. Once again, Sentry growled deep in the back of his throat. Ethan studied the dog. That anger, the full fluffed-out tail and hunched shoulders. Ethan wasn't sure if it was the man arriving who was setting off Sentry, or the fact that it was any intruder at the house. Sentry was obviously a guard dog, but was he guarding the house, or did he know the person coming toward him and hated him? Both were possibilities, giving Ethan lots to work from. But he couldn't count on the fact that Sentry would follow Ethan's instructions. Bella, on the other hand, was now positioned right beside him, same height as he was, nudging him, her tail wagging. He studied her for a moment, as he heard the rattling at the door. Whoever it was trying to get in was shitty with a pick. And that was something he filed away. He reached out a hand and placed it on Bella's muzzle. She quieted, her tail stilled, and she lowered her head to her paws, ears forward. He smiled. You had to love a dog that could pick up the nuances like she did. Suddenly the door popped open. For a moment there was nothing. Ethan watched from down low as a man dressed all in black with a hood over his head stepped into the kitchen. He glanced around as if familiarizing himself with the layout, then quickly moved toward Ethan. Ethan held back Bella, but Sentry wasn't being held back at all. He snarled and growled audibly. The man froze, reached out a hand. Boris? Sentry froze, his nose wrinkling, but the deep growl resumed. Instead of running away, the intruder stopped, raised his hand in a stop command for Sentry, and then, in a harsh whisper, ordered him to stand down. Sentry slowly stood down, his training taking over at a voice he recognized. Ethan watched carefully because Sentry, although he was giving way, didn't like it. He was looking for an opportunity to move on his own. The intruder walked forward a few steps. Good boy. I was hoping you would be around. As he crept closer, talking calmly to Sentry, the dog growled again in the back of his throat. The man held up his hand. What's wrong with you, Boris? You know better than this. He stopped a few feet away from the open doorway as his gaze caught sight of Bella. Bella. Bella didn't growl or bark. She stared at him, her ears back and her teeth showing. That confirmed an awful lot for Ethan. They both knew him. Neither wanted anything to do with him. The man slowly reached around behind him and pulled out a leash and a rope. He also had what appeared to be a police-issue baton. At the sight of the baton, Sentry growled louder. The man tucked it behind his back. Sentry calmed slightly but not enough. So the baton was the intruder's weapon of choice. And the man had come prepared for these dogs. Well, this asshole had had his last opportunity to beat up these dogs. Ethan waited for the man, leash in his hand, as he crept closer to Bella. "Bella, you're looking good. Can you sit up for me, please?" Bella stayed down, her head flat on her paws as Ethan had told her, her ears back. The man with the leash started to crouch, to get close, and her lips curled even higher, and in the back of her throat was her first warning sound. The man stared at her. "What the fuck? Why are both of you being such pains in the ass right now? What the hell happened to you?" Ethan wanted to punch him flat in the face and let the dogs have at him. But the man wasn't quite close enough yet. Ethan couldn't be sure another weapon wasn't somewhere on the asshole. But if Ethan got a chance to grab that baton, he'd take a few good wails on the asshole. The man reached out a hand to Bella. She didn't move, but she growled. He froze, then ordered her to obey. His voice rose, although still quiet enough not to wake anybody else in the house. His tone was sharp, getting angry. At that, Sentry stood and approached. His ears flat, his teeth showing, he growled at the intruder. The man froze. "What the fuck has happened to you, Boris?" He took one more step forward, and it was enough. Ethan snapped around the corner, his right hand out, connecting hard with the man's nose and jaw. He never even saw it coming. The blow was hard enough to send him backward several flailing steps before he went down on his back. Sentry went after him. The man cried out, again reaching for the baton, as Sentry grabbed the intruder's arm and stood over him. He shook the man's wrist, almost as if seeing the baton as an extension of the arm. Bella still lay here at Ethan's command. Blood running down the intruder's arm, he screamed at Sentry, but Sentry wasn't listening. He shook the intruder's arm harder, his jaws crunching on the man's weak forearm. The baton flailed around as the man tried to use it to get at the dog. Ethan stood, stepping on the man's other arm, and said, "Drop the baton. If you don't, I'll let him take off your arm." The intruder stared up at him. "Who the fuck are you? If you're the asshole who ruined our dogs, I'll make you pay for that," and then he screamed again as Sentry clenched down tighter. "Apparently somebody the dogs prefer over you." Ethan grabbed the baton carefully so as not to let Sentry see it as an extension of his arm and said, "Let go." The man really had no choice as Sentry once again shook hard. The intruder's fingers opened and the baton dropped to the man's chest. Sentry saw it, released the man's arm, and lunged for the baton. Ethan let him have it. He let him take the baton away and start to destroy it. Ethan crouched beside the injured man and said, "What the hell did you do to that poor dog?" He pulled off the man's face mask, exposing the intruder. Ethan didn't recognize him. "Are you the one who ruined our dogs?" the man roared. He tried to attack Ethan, but, with Ethan stepping on his good arm and his injured arm bleeding profusely, there wasn't a whole lot he could do except to kick his legs. As soon as one leg came up, Ethan grabbed it and pinned it down. The man screamed again. Bella moved closer. Ethan looked at her and said, "Good, Bella." She looked up at him, then looked down at the intruder, but her stance didn't release. "The dogs really hate you," Ethan said. "If even now, when they have an opportunity to turn on me, they don't want to." "They will," the man said. He snapped out commands at Bella to attack and kill. Bella, confused, obviously upset at the sight, stared at Ethan. He kept murmuring to her in a gentle voice, "Relax, Bella. Just guard. Nobody kills anymore." The man on the ground lost his temper, shouting and hurling epithets at her. At this point she looked at Ethan and sat down on guard duty. He smiled. "You see, you can't lose your temper with an animal. And you can never take it out on them with a weapon," he said in a conversational voice. "You can't rule by fear." "It's the only way you do rule," the intruder snapped. He groaned. "He broke my arm." "Yeah, he might have," Ethan said. "But that's not my fault. You were breaking and entering into this house." The man glared at him. His arm bled badly enough that Ethan knew he had to put a stop to it. He noticed a tea towel tossed against the back of a kitchen chair. He looked at the tea towel, pointed and said, "Bella, fetch." She bounded to her feet, looked at him in confusion. He pointed at the tea towel and she wandered in that direction, sniffed, looking for something to fetch, and he said, "Higher." Her nose went up a little bit higher. She grabbed the tea towel and brought it to him, but obviously was not certain of her position. He grabbed it, smiled and gave her a gentle pat. Then he praised her. "Good girl, Bella. Good girl. Now go back and guard." She returned to her position and sat down to watch the intruder. Ethan ripped a strip off the tea towel and wrapped it around the intruder's wrist, putting pressure on it to stop the bleeding. "I need a hospital, damn you," the man cried out. "Not some backward medicine." "What you need is a bullet," Ethan said calmly. "And of course, if Sentry had killed you in the meantime, I certainly wouldn't have had a problem with that." The man glared up at him. Ethan said, "How many people have you had these dogs kill?" The man sneered. But the waves of pain were taking their toll on him. "They're just animals. And Boris is my #1 tracker. But he's nowhere near what my Billy was." "What happened to this Billy?" "He was shot after he killed a man during a fight. Another guy got out a gun and shot him, but Billy got his man anyway. Unfortunately, we had to put him down." "And how many men had Billy killed?" The intruder shrugged. "Maybe a dozen. I don't know." "And Boris?" Ethan asked, using the name the intruder used. "He's attacked many, but I don't think he's got any kills under his belt yet. But he's young. By the time he's 6, he'll be well seasoned." "Not if I have any say in the matter," Ethan said cheerfully. "An animal like that, which gives you his loyalty, and all you do is turn him into a killer. That's why he was loyal. His predecessor loved the taste of blood. Don't kid yourself. These animals love an opportunity to take something down and tear it to shreds." They both looked at Sentry, who even now had the baton in shreds of leather and padding. But he was still working off his temper, still growling and attacking it. As Ethan watched, Sentry calmed slightly and focused on ripping off every piece of fabric and leather on the heavy steel center. Ethan shook his head. "It's good therapy, isn't it, Sentry?" "Good therapy is giving him a bloody cat or a rabbit to eat, preferably still alive," the man snarled. "You're ruining these dogs. And you've got a hell of a nerve stealing these animals and changing Boris's name. We all worked them and hard to get them to be the way we wanted them, and you are messing them up." "It's not your problem anymore," Ethan said. "You'll go away for a long time." "For what?" The man sneered. "For breaking into my girlfriend's house because she was having a little snit fit. Obviously she changed the locks, and I didn't know about it." "It's not that simple," Ethan said. "You're connected to the dogs. That puts you in the drug operation." "What do you know about the drug operation?" the man asked, his voice hesitant. "More than you do," Ethan said. He could hear a vehicle approach. He wasn't sure who it was, but he hoped it was Flynn. He needed backup soon. This asshole, as much as Ethan didn't want to get it for him, needed medical attention. Ethan was of the opinion a 6-foot-deep hole out in the back would have been a perfect answer. But rough justice had gone out of Texas a long time ago. Too damn bad. You can't know anything about it. That place has been operating in the shadows for a long time. Ethan nodded. So true. Until she told me all about it, he added with a smile. Once I heard about it, then I couldn't leave it alone. He could see the confusion in the intruder's eyes. Her? What are you talking about? But Ethan decided not to share. Besides, it shut down now. Yeah, but it'll only grow, the guy said. It's not like you'll hit them hard enough to stop them. If you want to share that information with the police, they might let you off a little lighter. Not likely. I'll get killed in jail anyway, he said. The bosses went through a bad patch a while ago. They should have killed off any loose ends. It would have saved them a lot of pain and money. Now it's standard practice after that mess. Quite possibly, Ethan said. And I can tell you one thing, if you ever come back here, I'll kill you myself. The man glared up at him, then he said in a low voice, I still don't understand what woman you're talking about. And I won't tell you, Ethan said. Hearing footsteps at the front door, Ethan slipped back slightly out of view. A heavy knock came at the door. Flynn. Yeah, it's me. You okay here? Come on to the kitchen door. Turn on some lights. This asshole is bleeding all over the floor. As Flynn approached, Sentry stood, growling in the back of his throat. Flynn stopped in the doorway and put up his hands. Ethan said, hit the light switch. Flynn followed his instructions. Light flooded the living room, so Ethan could see Sentry with his haunches up, standing over the absolutely destroyed baton. But it also showed Ethan beside a man bleeding quite badly on the floor. Flynn's eyebrows rose. Is she still asleep, or is she upstairs hiding? Believe it or not, I think she's asleep. Flynn looked at the dog in front of him and said, this must be one of those big rescues you took on. It is. This is Sentry. Ethan let out a sharp noise, then said, Sentry, Flynn is a friend. Sentry wasn't listening. Sentry, stand down. Sentry gave a hard shake. Ethan looked at the smirking intruder. You think it's funny you created a dog that's a killer? He motioned at Bella. Bella, stand guard. And then Ethan slowly straightened and walked over to Sentry, who stood in front of Flynn. Ethan walked up beside Flynn and stood at his side. Sentry looked at Ethan and then back at Flynn. Ethan reached down a hand, put it on the dog's fur, reached out his other hand toward Flynn and said, give me your hand. He did so, and Ethan told Sentry in a firm voice, friend. Stand down. His voice brooked no argument, but it was also calm and orderly. Sentry slowly quieted, the hairs on the back of his neck easing down as he studied the new arrival. Flynn brushed his hair off his forehead and said, wow. It should be safe for you to approach. Flynn looked beyond them into the kitchen and said, good thing because you're intruders trying to escape out the door. Ethan turned and saw the guy getting to his feet to make it to the kitchen door. Bella, attack, he ordered. Bella spun and jumped on the intruder's back, clamping down on his shoulder, bringing the man to the floor again. Ethan walked around Sentry, who was already heading toward Bella, looking for some fun himself. In the kitchen, Ethan ordered both dogs to stand back, which they did surprisingly enough. He grabbed the intruder, slammed him onto a chair and asked, do you want to go for another round? By now his shoulder welled up with blood too. He stared up at the two men, pain glazing his eyes. Ethan turned to look at Flynn and said, do you want to call the cops for me? I already did, he said. I figured that, if you had an intruder, you probably would take them down, and we'd need the cops eventually. Ethan checked the intruder's shoulder. You'll be fine, he snapped. I'll fucking shoot the dogs, the intruder said. You just wait. I'll get another chance, and I'll take them both out. Sentry lunged forward as if understanding what the intruder had said. Ethan held up his hand and ordered Sentry to stop. He didn't look like he would for a long moment. With his growling up the back of his throat and his hackles raised, Ethan stood strong. But he didn't use force. Finally, Sentry calmed down. As if giving the intruder a disgusted look, Sentry gave his head a shake and turned to join Bella sitting off to the side. Flynn approached quietly. Are you sure he's safe to have around? He'll be the best damn guard dog anybody could want, Ethan said. But we have to let him know most people aren't mean assholes like this guy. If you say so. Ethan laughed and sat on the floor between the dogs. He reached up to scratch them under the chin. Flynn stared in astonishment. You're braver than I am. How did you know they would let you do that? Both dogs are good animals, he said quietly. They will take to affection as much as they're running away from the brutality of this asshole. They're our dogs and you're ruining them, the intruder roared. I came to get them back, not sit here and watch you destroy them. "Oh, interesting," Ethan said. "I thought you might have been here for other reasons. Regardless, you'll be disappointed on both counts." He tilted his head to the side and studied the man. And then looked at Flynn. "What am I missing?" But Flynn's face had shifted and had locked down into a much harder, colder man than the one who had first arrived. He stepped backward, flattening against the wall as he sidled up to the window. "Did you have a chance to see if this guy came alone?" Ethan froze. Then he hopped to his feet and moved forward. "Bella," he ordered, "with me." At the bottom of the stairs he turned to look at Sentry and said, "Sentry, guard." Sentry snapped to attention, his ears up, and returned to the intruder on the chair. Ethan ran up the stairs with Bella, wondering if this had all been a distraction, and he'd missed the main event. Knowing he would wake her and terrify her, he shouldered open the barricaded door and stepped in regardless. With his heart in his throat, he stared at the empty bed, his worst thoughts confirmed. Bella raced forward and searched, but she ended up at the window. The window beside a door that led to a deck with a nice set of stairs down the back to the bottom deck. Somebody had kidnapped Sin.